Hello and welcome to the Leaders with Ambition podcast series. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my guest, Kerry Vermeulen. Kerry is the CMO of Siddeley Austin, and it's a global role, but incredibly international because she's based in Brussels, which I love. And we'll talk through Kerry growing up in the US in Chicago. And at one stage, thinking she might want to be an elementary school teacher, which is something we have to explore. Very interesting. After spending a semester in Oxford, she found a real passion and love for travel and this multicultural environment. And she decided, very brave, that she was going to spend some of her time studying in Europe, which is where she met her future husband. So she studied abroad, moved back to New York, and was not quite sure at the time where she wanted her career to go. And then, as these things sometimes happen, serendipity, she was sat next to somebody at a dinner who suggested going to work for a law firm. And then through that connection, Kerry found a role in a law firm. And then with that had progression into legal marketing. And her career has just gone from strength to strength since then. So we'll talk about that. And one of the things I love about Kerry is how intentional she really is about her career. And we'll discuss the transition that she had from management to leadership, and Kerry's a really strong leader, but also Kerry's beliefs around how important it is to ensure that oneself has got personal and professional development. And you really do have to throw yourself into that. And the impact that mentoring and sponsorship has had on her career and how subsequently she's paid it forward. The power of networking will come strongly through this as well. And for those that know Kerry, Kerry's very good at this, but she's also part of the inaugural LMA Europe board. So we'll go on to talk about the impact the European LMA board has had throughout UK and Europe and how that's continuing to develop and grow. So lots for us to unpick and get into today. But without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Kerry to bring her career history to life for us. Kerry, over to you.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Nikki. Wow, what an introduction. Makes my career sound very glamorous indeed.
It is.
And I love how you say it's very intentional. I mean, it has to some extent, but at the same time, like you said, a lot of it was down to serendipity and sort of taking advantages of opportunities that were in front of me along the way.
Take us back to growing up. What was it like for you? Because I know that you had a really happy childhood. You and I have talked about that, and you learned lots around how to deal with people. So it didn't seem quite a natural progression for you to move to the other side of the world, did it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was born near Chicago, but grew up in Wisconsin in the Milwaukee area and had I think a very kind of traditional American childhood. I was in the high school band. I played oboe in the marching band. I was part of a youth group and I had a really tight, close community around me where I grew up.
And you were a cheerleader, weren't you?
And I was a cheerleader for a while. Not a great one, but, an enthusiastic one. So, I tried a lot of different things. And I think that's something, if I look back, I tried a lot of things. I did a little bit of music, a little bit of cheerleading, some gymnastics. I rode horses. I love to try new things. And that's still true today. I do like variety. And I think that's also what I love about travel as well, is that it exposes you to lots of new experiences. But yes, I was sort of on a path that seemed like I would stay in that relative environment. But when I went to university in Wisconsin, that's where I actually met my husband. He was the only Belgian on campus. Go figure. And I ended up across the table from him at a bar one evening. And, the rest is history, as they say. While I was in college, I did, like you say, I spent a semester in Oxford, my first kind of taste abroad, living abroad. And then I studied in France for another semester during university. And after that, my husband and I, now a husband and I, were already together. I decided that I wanted to finish my studies in Europe. And that was really a pivotal moment. My parents were very surprised, but very supportive. And I'm eternally grateful to them. But
it must have been hard to them, Kerry, as well, because it's a big move. You're young. It's a lot for your parents to go, yeah, crack on.
Exactly. I mean, my youngest daughter is now even older than I was at that time. And I think about what that feels like to they both of my daughters have lived and traveled abroad, and it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think as young people we really think about that impact on our parents. We're
Yeah.
more just, emboldened by the experience and the thrill of trying something new. And I didn't see it as a scary or even very daring thing. I just thought of it as truly very exciting.
And there was no WhatsApp back then either. You couldn't easily just
No.
do a call.
It was a weekly call because it was very expensive, even phone internationally. So it was a weekly call home and writing letters, lots of letters. And I still have those letters in a box,
Oh,
from
I
the
love
times.
that.
Yeah, it's really nostalgic to think back to
Oh,
that way of communicating with people. And actually, I guess as I say that, I think writing has always been an important thing to me. It's not like I've written a book or anything like that, but I loved writing and receiving letters. I
yeah.
still love writing in my job today. And I think the power of having to commit your thoughts to paper, it makes you reflect more than
Yeah.
our kind of quick chats today do. So I think, something I would still encourage people to do is to take time to put pen to paper from time to time and get your thoughts down on paper.
That's such a good point. And there's a new concept that I've been reading about called friction maxing, which again is around more writing things down because we're so used to typing. And obviously some people need to do that if it helps and assists them. But it's around actually committing thoughts and pen to paper and
Yeah.
how that then opens up things. I think that's really fascinating.
No, it does. It does. In fact, just this year, I switched kind of from note taking like in OneNote or on my computer to
Yeah.
a Remarkable, which is, you write it actually, even though then you can keep it
Right.
digital.
Down.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But so it does that mind hand kind of, it triggers that thought process of what it does to your brain to actually write things down.
So interesting.
Maybe it's a sign of getting older too. If I don't write things down, I forget them.
It could be true as well. So you obviously spent some time in Europe, and was that at that stage, did you think this is where I will end up living, or were you always planning to go back home?
To be honest, I was actually talking about this with my daughter, thinking about this podcast, and I said, I don't think I was really even focused on where I would end up at that point. It was more of like, what am I doing next? And my husband and I did return to the US right after I graduated. I studied in Brussels, and when we graduated, we moved to New York. He was starting a PhD there. And it was right before we moved from Belgium back to New York that I was at that dinner that you described. It was an American-Belgian Association dinner for business people. And I forget why we were invited even, but I was sat next to a man, I'll never forget his name, Bob White. I hope he's still out there somewhere. I'm not in touch with him anymore, but he was a partner at a law firm in Texas. And he asked me what I wanted to do with my life and what I planned to do in New York. And I said, I have no idea. I have to go look for a job. I am maybe interested in the law. So I was asking him about his career. And he said, well, you know what? Maybe you should go be a paralegal at a law firm. They're always hiring in New York. And he said, I have a great friend at Skadden Arps. I can hook you up for an interview. And he did. And so about 2 weeks later, I actually went to New York, had an interview with some folks at Skadden. They said, we're not hiring anymore for our site kind of summer intake. But if you go uptown now to Midtown to White and Case, I know someone who's still hiring there. And I literally got on the subway from downtown and went to Midtown, showed up at White and Case's office, had an interview, and a week later I was starting as a paralegal.
Such an amazing story, Carrie, isn't it?
Like, I couldn't believe it. I felt in awe of these big firms, and I had no idea what I was getting into. It was incredibly hard work. I learned so much, and I found really that I discovered that I loved the law firm environment. I loved the intellectual challenge of it. I loved the pace of it. I loved the variety. I loved the people aspect of it. And so it's kind of, for me, ticked a lot of the boxes that I know now really are what lets me thrive in an environment, to have variety, to have a quick pace, to have the expectations kind of set high, and then I'll strive to achieve them. So it was a great experience. And I ended up staying in legal all of my career since then. Didn't become a lawyer, but have done lots of other things in law firms.
again, you talk through that as if it's an amazing achievement, and we'll go on to delve more into that. But also, you really did grasp an opportunity and run
Yeah.
with it. And that's incredibly important, isn't it, for people to do
Yeah.
and to think about and to put yourself out there so that opportunities come
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah. I think it's the times when you say yes to something that maybe you hadn't conceived of before or you hadn't thought about doing. It's being open to being stretched. And this was a city I'd never been in before, an environment I'd never worked in before. But I thought, well, if they think I can do it, then I probably can. And let's give it a shot. And
It worked. And look at you now.
it worked. No, it worked. I mean, it wasn't without challenges. And there were some moments where I thought, this is hard. And I still think that sometimes. But I think it's working through the hard things as long as you have good support around you. And I think that's another aspect of that. Forming good relationships. And like you said, looking for and engaging good mentors and asking for advice and support. But when you do that, you can achieve difficult things. You can work through them and you can learn. And then those difficult things aren't as difficult anymore. And then there's the next challenging thing in front of you.
And I think that's a really good point. And I know that you have a circle of peers that are also trusted advisors, and you have a very strong psychological safety group around you as well. And that's really important, isn't it, as you're growing in your career? And I think it's important to do it from all stages in your career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important. I mean, there's even studies about this, that people who have work friends or friends who are peers in your industry or in your professional environment really thrive better and are more stress resilient, because those are the people that you can offload to when you're stressed or you need to bounce an idea off of someone, or you want to sense check something and just kind of, get a reading of, am I on the right track here? Am I thinking about this in the right way? I mean, today I'm incredibly fortunate to be one of two CMOs at Sidley, and we do this job jointly, and Erin Baxendale and I, and we say almost weekly, we're so glad we don't need to do this alone, because it's incredible to have that kind of sounding board and sense check and balancing voice as you're doing things. But I also have that support, like you say, through a really strong peer network. I did make an effort to engage in networking opportunities and get to know people who are doing similar things in other firms. And we've sort of grown up together then over the last couple decades. And some of us have known each other now for, going on 20 years. And some of us established the LMA Europe chapter together. And, these are the people I have on speed dial or messaging. And if I have a question, I know we're going to help each other out. And that's just, it's invaluable. Makes a whole experience very enriching.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's, as you and I've talked about previously, it's really pushing yourself out there sometimes. So, not everybody's a natural networker or naturally feels comfortable in these situations. And to your point, sometimes saying yes, even when it feels uncomfortable, is actually what then opens up these situations for you and enables you to build a relationship. So important.
Yeah, I'm actually not a natural networker in this like traditional sense of the word. I don't actually love a cocktail party and lots of small talk, but I love meeting people that I can form a connection with, and then seeing those people again in those kinds of settings gives me energy. But I think it's okay to acknowledge what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy, and actually be your authentic self. So in a networking big situation, I will instinctively kind of seek out some of the people I know, but actually through them, I will then meet other people in a closer setting. And that's natural for me. And I think that I am good at establishing those connections then and maintaining them.
Yeah.
I'm less good at just networking the room, but that's okay. That's other people's strength.
But I think that's a really good point as well, is that, particularly in a networking scenario, and I'm thinking of some of, the work that you and the rest of the team and the board do at LMA, is they make it a really safe space for people to learn how to network. And there's always someone to do an introduction or to say, have you met this person? I think that works incredibly well. But it's the opportunity sometimes to push yourself out of your comfort zone and to feel that you've got somebody that you can have a conversation with that will be similar to an experience you've had, or it may be completely different, but it's safe, isn't it? And I think that's something that the LMA have done incredibly well.
Yeah, no, we're delighted with the engagement that we've had with it.
Yeah.
It's really
It's good.
incredible.
So going back onto your career, I know that you were doing really well, as you were saying, in your role. And then there was an opportunity for you and your husband to move back over to Europe, which you took. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He had to go back and do research for his PhD, supposedly for a year. And so we were still young. We didn't have kids. It was easy to kind of pick up and say, okay, we'll do that. And I found a job with another law firm, Cleary Gottlieb, in Brussels. And that 1 year ended up being about 30 now in the meantime. And so we didn't actually go back. And again, it wasn't actually a really conscious decision. It was sort of one decision after another. He found a job right after doing his PhD. I was doing well and enjoying my work at Cleary. And one thing, kind of just led to another. And we did have a family, and we have raised our family here, and we love it. But what's always been wonderful for me is that I've worked in US law firms. And being American, I do now have both nationalities. But it means that I feel like I have two homes, two countries, and I go back and forth. And for me, that's a really nice connection to have my professional life still sort of centered in a US-based law firm and be able to combine going back and forth for work with visits to family and friends. And so it's been not without some challenges, of course, but it's been a natural kind of dual country existence for me and our family. And that's been a beautiful thing to see that's how it's evolved. Not really by design, but now certainly it's something I look back on and think it's been an enriching life that we've led.
Yeah. I'm sure your parents, when were very supportive about you going just to do a semester, didn't think it would be another 30 years later.
Yeah. My mom would tell you, that she feared this as the outcome, but was willing to let me do it. But, actually my parents now, they say that they've come to see it as a gift as well, because it brought them to Europe much more than they ever would have. They also love to travel, and they've spent a lot of time here. And they've used it as a springboard to go and visit other places in Europe. I think we've all found that it has been something we've been able to embrace rather than feeling like we're missing out on things. We actually try to take advantage of the quality time that we do have together, because it's usually quite intense. Like they'll come and visit for a couple of weeks, or I'll go there for a couple of weeks. So you're together, very together for intense periods of time. And that's also very special.
It's not just a cup of tea. Is it popping in for a cup of tea?
No. I mean, I do miss that I can't just pop by, for a quick cup of tea, as you say. But still, we've really made it work, I think, as a family.
I love that. And you made the move to Sidley Austin, and you were starting to really develop your marketing career, your marketing and business development career. Did you feel you'd found your passion? When did you start to recognize this is something that you're really good at, you love, and that this was going to be your career?
Well, I think it kind of evolved. I was working in sort of legal support functions in law firms before, at least in US law firms, before marketing was a thing, before we actually had a department named marketing or business development. But I was doing things that now are classified as marketing and business development. I was working alongside lawyers on pitches and proposals. We were gathering experience and stories of solutions that the lawyers had achieved for clients, and we were telling those stories externally or internally. And as I started doing that work in the context of kind of a broader legal support function, I realized those were the kinds of things that I really enjoyed doing the most and I was good at. Then as the opportunities within law firms for business professionalism actually expanded, I mean, we were adding business professionals, we were adding functionality and capabilities. I started then to focus more and more on what we now call marketing. And so I think, the last 5 years or so of when I was at Cleary, and then certainly as I made the transition to Sidley Austin in Brussels, I was really focused by then on practice support and regional support in the context of marketing and business development. And I loved that. And that did start to really gel, in particular when I moved to Sidley I think I've been a long timer at the 3 firms that I've worked
Wow.
at. I've been someone who kind of sticks, which is nice. But it's also with each move, you sort of consolidate your experience and you go forth as that, you're seen as that expert or professional that with all the experience that you've amassed up to that date. And so I felt that when I moved to Sidley, that I was able to take what I had learned and really be seen as a marketing professional,
Yes.
perhaps
Yeah.
really for the first time. And then, I've been now at Sidley for 20 years and people, if I interview people, they always ask me like, what kept you at one place for that long? And my answer is always that it's been that it doesn't feel like one job for 20 years. There's been so many opportunities to either expand my remit or shift my remit to take on management responsibilities in addition to, my actual subject matter responsibilities, and then eventually leadership role. And that all happened quite naturally, sort of as I was ready for it. Things were evolving and, developing at the firm to make a next step possible. And so if you do what you're doing really well and focus on honing your skills, strengthening your relationships, but keeping your eyes open to what the next opportunity may be or what the firm that you're at might need next, then the next step often becomes clear, kind of, even if it's not an already mapped out career path, because some of the roles I've held didn't even exist before I held them. And I do think it's still the case that legal marketing is continuing to evolve at a rapid pace. It's more professional than it used to be. We have organizations like the LMA. We have, training that people can get rather than just having to learn on the job. And I think if you take advantage of that and bring those things into your firm, you will be able to continue to grow and take your next step, whether at that firm or another one. Your next step might not be here, and that's okay too. Like if we want to be part of your career story, your career journey, and we'd love for people to stay as long as they can and it makes sense for them. But if if their next step is somewhere else too, then they should do that. Take us with them a little bit. And you're a part of our alumni community, and we love that too. And that does help expand our collective networks.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think, as you say, it's been fascinating to see how the world of legal marketing has become a profession now. And it's very clearly a profession, isn't it? And it will continue to evolve and adapt, particularly as the impact that AI has and is having at the moment as well. And that's exciting to be in a world where you can evolve and it's not stationary. And this isn't just the way that you do it, and just keep adding value all the time, because that's essential in your roles, isn't it? It's to add value to the firm.
Absolutely.
At the forefront. So talk to me then about how you felt when you transitioned from management to leadership. And when did you know? Did you wake up one morning and go, I'm a leader now?
That's a good question. I don't know that I did. I certainly didn't wake up one day and think, oh, now this is different. It's because I think management, I already considered when I was a manager, for instance, and I first started being a supervisor of others, I already felt like that entails some leadership skills. So I don't know if I made the distinction as much. For me, there was a difference, though, when I started leading teams that were more remote and, spread out in the world. So when I started leading our team in Europe and Asia Pacific, for instance, for me, that was a big step because I was then exposed to, and it was super exciting because I got to learn so much about our Asia Pacific offices and the way of doing business in that part of the world. And I got the opportunity to travel out there a few times and meet our team. And it opened my mind to yet another kind of dimension of how we need to think about and nuance how we are going to market and how we're engaging with clients. So, but having that truly international role at that time did make me have to work differently because you're not working anymore with as much of a local or kind of regional team that is easy to reach from time zone perspectives and easy to be in front of. So you have to adapt your methods and make sure that you're still available to people and providing them what they need and the support and guidance they require without being right in front of them all the time. And now I'm talking about pre-COVID too, because I feel like the world is very different after the pandemic, and we all learned how to do this kind of thing. And and interact digitally and over video conference. Now that's the norm, but when I was first doing the international role, that wasn't quite the case. It was phone calls, lots of emails, and then needing to
Face to
travel a
face.
little bit
Yeah.
more face to face.
So when you were doing the travel, were your children younger? What sort of age was that?
They were still in primary, secondary school. So yeah,
It was challenging as well.
less challenging. Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate that my husband and I both have had a certain amount of flexibility with our roles. And so I wasn't being told you need to travel on these dates. So if I knew I needed to be out in Hong Kong, for instance, I had some control over when that would work for our family. And I think that's important. But I have always found travel invigorating too. And so it's not, for some people, it's exhausting and tiring. It can be tiring, but I also find it gives me energy. So it was something that I wanted to fit into my life. And I think that's something you need to know, about yourself. Do you enjoy that? Do you want that in a role or not? Because it isn't for everyone. That's for sure.
And these big roles in the law firms, particularly the size that you work in, you need to have, you have to be available, don't you, for travel. And as you say, if that's not right for you, you have to make the right choice for yourself as well, and think about very carefully about the sort of firm that you're going to go to and the sort of role that you're going to do.
Well, exactly. And it has to come at the right time too. So sometimes people, indeed, if they have small children at home or they're caring for an elderly parent or someone, that's not the time that they are able to do that. But there may be a time later in their career or at another juncture where they are able to. And so I think it's also important not to kind of pigeonhole people and think like, oh, they're never going to be able to do that, because I've witnessed many of our team members evolve just as I have as to what they can take on, what they're interested in taking on, and what they're ready for at different stages. And so continuing to check in with people and challenging them and encouraging them to explore, what are you ready for now in your career? I think we all would get bored, and I've heard people describe things as not burnouts, but bore-outs. And I think that's, I've never encountered that yet in my career, a bore-out for sure. It's never a dull day. But I think that's important to have those kinds of conversations with people to help them be thinking about what is the next step.
And what's important, what do you get? Like you say, travel feeds you, but that's not for everybody. But what is it that feeds you? And then you can help direct that career, can't you? Yeah. So just going on to that, actually, you've got a big job. You do a lot of travel. How do you protect yourself and avoid the stress and burnout? What do you do for that?
Well, it's changed over time. When my children were younger and at home, I would get a lot of joy from just making sure I was available for them, and especially at home on weekends and able to spend time with them. As they've grown and sort of left the house, I now fill it in with some other things. Like my husband and I have a boat that we love to take out on the weekends when it's boating season on the canals and rivers in the Netherlands. And it's kind of a slower form of travel than I have to do for work. And I find it very mindful and relaxing. So that's great. I've done yoga from time to time. I love to take walks with my dog. Even when I'm working from home, that's one of those easy things I can get out in between meetings and take a walk with the dog, get out in the fresh air. So I think I think you have to look for it. And I guess what I've tried to do is not try to put the pressure on myself of trying to achieve a perfect balance all the time.
There isn't a perfect balance, is there?
There is none. And then I say this to any, working parent who asks me about how did you make this work or find a balance? And I'm like, it's a day-to-day rebalancing act. And you have to let that be okay. There's going to be some days or weeks where you feel like you're really nailing it at work and just firing on all cylinders, but maybe you had to get some extra help at home to cover things there. And then other times where your family may really need you and you're going to have to pull back from work a little bit and let some colleagues help out. You have to feel like it's okay to say, hey, I need to step back a little right now because I've got things going on. I think if you're honest with yourself and your colleagues and your family, then you can find, a sense of balance, but it's an ever shifting story. Even today, I mean, it's just, there's some weeks where I think like, this is working great. And then the next week I think, whoa, okay, I lost my balance a little there and I'm going to have to
Yeah.
regroup. But I don't beat myself up about it, and I try to just make sure that I realize that's okay. That's normal when you're in kind of a busy professional role. And the important thing is to keep checking in with yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's really good, is to recognize, and it's hard sometimes, isn't it, to recognize when you're near burnout, because normally it's a very either busy period, either work, home life, or sometimes they collide, and then it's coming from
Yeah.
every direction. And it's hard
Yeah.
sometimes to recognize that you do need to build that protection around yourself.
Yeah.
And so if you, again, I think it goes to having this group of trusted advisors around you as well, where
Mhm.
sometimes people can go, actually, you probably need to just check in with yourself a bit. And I think that's so
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So what about when we talked about obviously the importance of mentoring and sponsorship, and you've had both of that in your life, as we know, and also the executive coaching element, and how you pay it forward to your teams? How important is it for people to really think about what they are doing with their career and being intentional with their own careers as well?
Well, it's super important. I think you must remember that you are ultimately, even if we all have bosses and people we work for, but you're the driver of your career. And you have to kind of continue to tell yourself, I'm in the driver's seat. I get to decide how I approach my job and my role. And I've had great mentors and coaches and bosses and people who've given me something. And I feel like we are all the amalgamation of all the great things that we've learned from the people around us, whether those have been people who've supervised us and actively mentored us, to just people we've observed and thought, oh, I really like how they're doing that. I'm going to try that myself and take that on. And I kind of think of it as trying some things on as you grow in your career. Like, I'm going to try this approach, maybe in a difficult situation that I was struggling with, and see if that helps. And if it works for you, great. You take that on board and that's part of your toolkit now. And if it doesn't work for you and you feel like, oh, that doesn't really feel authentic to me, then you try something else. But I think we are a collection of all of those influences that we've had around us, but you need to be open to them, like thinking
Yeah.
about, oh, I actually can add to my toolkit of ways that I deal with different situations. I can ask good questions and learn and seek out the mentorship of those around me. I don't think mentorship is just something that is
And yeah.
happen. You have to seek it out and ask. I mean, there are formal mentoring programs, of course, and if those are on offer at your organization, or for instance, in the context of LMA, there's a mentoring program. If you have those opportunities, take them or give your time to be part of them.
Yeah.
But you can also ask for it too, from people that you really admire. And people are often, I find, super flattered to be asked, like, oh,
Yeah.
would you mind just having a coffee with me? I'd love to ask you a few questions about your perspective on this. Or, I'd love to hear more about your career and how you got to where you are, because I would like to go, that direction myself. And when I've asked people those questions or invited those conversations, people have been so generous with their time. And I try to be as well if people ask me.
You're going to get inundated after this podcast. That'll be it, Carrie.
I promise I'll try, but yeah. I do think there is something to that as you get more senior, there may be a lot of requests or demands on your time. And I am someone who would love to give my time and attention to everyone. You can't do that for everyone, but you can help find them a good mentor too. So even just a quick kind of intake or like level setting conversation to figure out what are they trying to achieve, what are their goals, and then think about who in your network might help them. You can make connections that way. It doesn't have to all be you. And I'm certainly not going to be the right mentor for everyone. So offering to connect them with someone who might be a great mentor for them is also a good thing to do.
It's great. And I love what you're saying there about, the toolkit and also the authenticity around it all as well. And that's so important, isn't it, to ensure that people keep doing that. It's essential. But what about imposter syndrome then? Have you ever suffered from that at any point in your career?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, for sure. And there's been times where I think, Oh, I now I'm not sure if I'm in the right role, or am I really ready to do what they're asking me to do, or what I see in front of me? For sure. Yeah, for sure. I don't really know exactly how I push through that. I think I just do. I think I have a great sense of responsibility. So if I've agreed to do something, or I've been given a responsibility, I just instinctively really feel compelled to live up to that. And I
Right.
think that helps me somehow power through that imposter syndrome. I think I try to trust that if the people around me feel that I'm ready for something, then I must be, even if
Yeah.
I don't quite feel it yet. And I'm going to trust that, and I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to do my best. I know that may not be perfect, certainly not the first time, but
But you'll get there.
yeah,
Yeah.
you'll get there, and you'll
Yeah.
get there by trying and asking for feedback and taking that feedback on board. I did have a boss who used to say feedback is a gift, and that's one of the things that stayed with me the most. And I try to invite feedback and treat it as a gift, even if it's sometimes hard to hear. But that's what makes you grow, because it is in those stretch moments that you're really growing and evolving. And if you can embrace them and not be fearful of them, that's, I think, what really helps people take that next step.
Yeah, and I love that. Feedback is a gift, and you're so right. And it's interesting, isn't it? I know that lots of people ask for feedback these days, but they want to hear good feedback. And actually, with good also comes
Yeah.
improvement. That's what helps you grow. That's what helps you move to the next level, doesn't it? So I
Yeah.
think it's great that you see it as a gift.
I think so too. And it is a gift to learn how to give feedback effectively. I
Well,
actually do find that harder, because it's easy to give positive feedback, but when you have to give constructive feedback, how do you do so in a way that puts someone at ease and doesn't get them on the defensive,
yeah.
and encourages them to see it as a gift? I think that's really a skill that is worth focusing on developing.
Yeah, I would agree. And what about, what would you say are the biggest challenges facing you and your peers at the moment? So CMOs in law firms.
I think the the pace of change, generally speaking, just, and it's probably not unique to the legal field, but I do think that the technological and AI driven solutions and changes and tools and options that are out there are causing us all to rethink, are there better, smarter, more efficient ways to do a lot of the things that we do? I'm not particularly worried that AI is going to replace, our jobs or our people. I'm more concerned about, how do we make ourselves savvy enough to keep in touch with where things are headed, and to make tweaks to how we're working that are going to improve service delivery within our firm and for our clients. And it's hard to do that at the same pace at which things are evolving right now.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we just learn new things, and then they're already almost obsolete. And so I do feel like we're all feeling that pressure of just working in a very, very dynamic, fast-paced, changing environment. And you need to kind of be rebuilding the plane while you're flying it, because we're still delivering all the things we've ever done, and even more. So you need to keep doing that while you're also looking for ways to improve things and set your team up to be really future-proof. So that's sort of top of mind for me right now as a CMO, is how do we keep the team supported in doing all of the things they're doing today. And some of that is still very manual, while trying to build a new construct that will let them work more effectively and efficiently in the future, and free up their time and capacity to be more strategic about the things that they do. A good news is I don't see any slowing down for the demand for marketing and business development in law firms. In fact, there seems to be more demand than ever before. All that more important to find smarter ways of working, because we can't really work harder. So we've got to work smarter. That's what I'm thinking about a lot these days.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it's interesting when you look at wanting to ensure you've got the right talent for your firms at the moment. And the
Absolutely.
amount of culture is incredibly important, isn't it? Particularly for the younger generations coming through. That's the biggest question we get is, what's culture like?
What's
And I
the
know
culture?
you're very passionate about culture, and you do a lot of work around that as well, don't you, in the firm?
Yeah, our firm feels very strongly about having a positive and collaborative and supportive culture for all of the people that work there. That's tough when you're also trying to deliver at a really high standard day in, day out, to maintain that and make sure that everyone feels like there's mechanisms and expectations to work effectively together as a team. There's almost nothing we do as marketers that you can do completely alone. You need to work with and through other people, either through our lawyers or other departments or other members of our team to deliver service. And so having a culture where you feel safe, supported, and that roles and responsibilities are clear is really important. That helps you feel like, okay, I know my role and I know my part of the solution, and I know how to work with others collaboratively. I think collaboration is something people talk about all the time. You actually need your structure, and your processes need to underpin that and actually reinforce it. Because collaboration without clarity of roles, responsibilities, and expectations is very difficult. So culture is something that I think you can think of as the end product. It's like what results from having good systems in place, clear expectations, and just a sense of knowing where you fit into the bigger picture.
Yeah. And there's so many different kinds of culture, and that's why you have to make sure you're finding what works for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very important. But what about words of wisdom then, Kerry? Maybe from when Kerry went just for a couple of months to Oxford and then ended up spending the rest of her life in Europe.
And then here I am. Yeah. The girl from Milwaukee, how did she get here? Yeah. I think really for me, it's all about continuing to be curious in everything you do and wherever you are in your career, having an open mind and being really curious, eager to learn. I think it's so much more important to have the good question than it is to have the good answer. So I love it when I'm in a meeting and someone asks a good question that just stops everyone and people go, oh, that's a really good question. And it elevates the discussion and the dialogue and makes people think about things differently. And it enhances the brainstorming that's going on at that moment. And the good question helps you get to the good answer.
Yeah.
And so I really love that concept of continuing to challenge myself to be continuously curious and open-minded, and also encouraging our team to keep thinking out of the box. Like, we don't have to just keep doing things the way we've always done them. No, be curious, ask a question, elevate the conversation that way.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, I have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I love Be Curious, and I really love that final element you had there about asking good questions. Don't think about the great answer, but think about the good question to really open up and get people to think differently. So absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Kerry.
Great to talk to you, Nikki, as always.